of those bygone days. He felt it was necessary to keep something from the past, and not long after, an old acquaintance appeared once more. It was the official from the Marshal Bureau. Once full of youthful vigor, he was now an old man with a head of white hair. He sighed, asking if the war was still going on after all this time, only to learn that the previous emperor had passed away. With a new ruler on the throne, the court was in chaos, and the first line of defense for the realm had already been broken. It was only thanks to the eldest princess, who had mastered the art of war and taken to the battlefield herself, that the second line still held. The old official looked at him with desperation, pleading that the great Qin Empire had no generals left to lead its armies. He explained that the immortal sex couldn't be relied upon, and now, he was the only one who could save the realm. He wondered aloud if things were truly so dire that the eldest princess had to lead. It seemed absurd that a woman had to take the field. As he prepared to refuse, he paused mid-motion, and seeing his cold expression, the old man feared he was still unwilling to help. The official hurriedly added that although the eldest princess was a woman, she possessed the indomitable spirit of the founding emperor. She had declared that if Great Qin fell, the common people would become nothing more than livestock for the northern emperor's blood cultivators. He clarified that he hadn't actually said no, reminding the official that he, too, had once risen from the common folk. He couldn't bear to watch the suffering, yet it felt shameful that the men of the empire were gone, leaving a woman to stand alone. It was indeed a disgrace, and while the official praised his power, he told the old man to stop with the empty flattery. He asked for the location, and as he reached for his bamboo hat, the old man quickly replied that the battle was at Duanxia Pass. The pass was 3,000 miles away, a distance so vast the official suggested he should at least prepare for the journey. Before the words could even leave the old man's mouth, a violent gust of wind erupted, forcing his eyes shut against the pressure. When he finally opened them, the room was empty. Only 2 deep footprints remained in the solid bluestone floor as proof he had been there. Meanwhile, 3,000 miles away at Duanxia Pass, the setting sun bled across the sky over the empire's final crumbling barrier. The fortress was on the verge of collapse, its walls littered with the fallen, all beneath the shadow of a tattered imperial banner. There we find the eldest princess, Lu Rian, her silver armor stained dark red as she leaned on a broken sword, gasping for breath. She stood as the final spark of the royal family's dignity, while outside the gates, a dark, oppressive army gathered like a storm. The tens of thousands of northern emperor troops held their advance, waiting for the command of a blood-robed elder hovering in midair. The elder stood atop a massive artifact made of white bone, clutching a banner where countless souls wailed in eternal agony. He looked down at the carnage and let out a cold, sinister laugh that echoed across the battlefield. The blood-robed elder let out a cold snort and waved the banner of 10,000 souls, causing a furious, ghostly wind to howl instantly. Countless vengeful spirits coalesced into a massive, spectral claw that slammed toward the city walls, a terrifying strike known as the Nether Ghost Claw. This was a full-power blow from a late-stage Foundation establishment cultivator. Against such force, a mortal army would be turned to liquid in an instant. Lu Rian closed her eyes in utter despair, never imagining that after coming so close to defending the gateway, she would fail at the final step. It seemed unthinkable that a cultivator would personally intervene in a mortal war, spelling a certain, tragic end for the Great Qin Empire. And yet, at this hair-raising moment of life and death, a sudden, piercing whistle erupted from high above the heavens. Everyone instinctively looked up to see a streak of azure light descending like a falling star, cutting through the sky with incredible speed. The light arrived first, slamming violently into the massive spectral claw hanging in midair without the use of any flashy spells or magic. There was only pure, brutal kinetic energy behind the impact as it struck the Nether Ghost Claw that had been meant to massacre the city. The moment it touched the azure light, the spectral claw shattered like tofu hitting a sledgehammer, exploding into a vast cloud of black mist. The light didn't slow down, plummeting straight into the open ground before the city walls and causing the very earth to tremble violently. It felt like a massive earthquake. The resulting shockwave was so powerful it sent tens of thousands of northern cavalrymen and their horses flying into the air. A deathly silence fell over the battlefield, gripping both the fallen northern army and the weary defenders atop the city walls. We see them all staring in stunned silence as the dust slowly clears from the center of a massive crater, revealing a figure within. He slowly stood up, casually brushing the dust off his long robes before straightening the bamboo hat atop his head. He muttered to himself that the journey had been a bit long, which, to be fair, is quite an understatement for 3,000 miles. Admitting he hadn't controlled his landing force very well, he looked up and asked if she was the one in charge here. Lu Rian remained frozen for a long moment before finally answering in a trembling voice that yes, she was the one. She hesitantly asked which immortal mountain he hailed from, but he simply replied that he wasn't an immortal at all. He turned his back to the city wall and looked up at the blood-robed elder in the sky, who looked just as bewildered as everyone else. He calmly explained that he was merely a town mayor who had heard there was some trouble brewing in these parts. He had come specifically to mediate the situation, but the blood-robed elder in the sky immediately scanned his body with divine sense. To the elder's surprise, there wasn't a single ripple of spiritual energy. He appeared to be nothing more than a common mortal. He wondered if this newcomer was just a martial artist who had trained in some physical techniques, which, to be honest, seemed unlikely. Though he couldn't fathom how the spectral claw had shattered, the elder's disdain for mortals was already etched into his very marrow. The elder's confusion quickly turned to a humiliated rage as he formed a hand seal and summoned a crimson flying sword. The blade turned into a streak of blood-red light aimed straight for the man's forehead, prompting Lu Rian to scream out a warning. And yet, he didn't move an inch. At the very moment the sword was about to pierce his brow, he simply raised his right hand. With a casual flick of his finger, that spirit sword, capable of slicing through iron like butter, was sent flying backward. Not only that, but the massive counterforce caused the blade to instantly spiderweb with cracks until, with a sharp snap, it shattered. As his soul-bound treasure was destroyed, the blood-robed elder violently coughed up a mouthful of blood, his eyes filled with terror. He gasped that this was impossible, unable to comprehend what kind of physical body could withstand such an attack. Even among body cultivators, he had never heard of someone breaking a spirit tool with their bare hands. It was simply too fragile. Then, the man slightly bent his knees, causing the ground beneath him to cave in as he left only an afterimage behind. In the next heartbeat, he appeared hundreds of meters in the air, right in front of the elder. This wasn't flight, mind you. It was pure, raw jumping power. The elder's pupils shrank as he desperately scrambled to conjure a spiritual energy shield. He begged for mercy, claiming to be from the Chiyu sect, but the man remained expressionless as he threw a single punch. There was no technique involved here, only absolute strength. The force of his fist compressed the air into a visible shockwave. The blow slammed into the spiritual shield, which crumpled like wet paper, and the force continued on right through the elder's back. The impact carved a vacuum trail through the clouds 1,000 meters long, leaving the elder to stare in shock at the hole in his chest. Until the very moment of his death, he couldn't comprehend what kind of power this was. Meanwhile, we see our protagonist beginning his free fall back to Earth. He landed steadily upon the city walls, standing directly before Lu Rian as the Northern Army watched their godlike elder fall. Seeing their master killed with a single punch, the three armies fell into instant chaos, with generals and soldiers alike casting aside their armor. They fled in utter disgrace, leaving a deathly silence atop the walls of Daqing as every soldier stared at him in sheer terror. He paid the crowd no mind, his gaze fixed only on the eldest princess before him, whose regal beauty remained striking even in this moment. Lu Rian took a deep breath, her body trembling slightly as she gave him a deep, respectful bow of gratitude. She mentioned that the man claimed to be from the Chiyu sect, wondering aloud if they would eventually seek revenge for his death. The Chiyu sect, as it turns out, is located far away in the hidden Eagle Mountains of the spirit realm. And here we learn that strict rules govern the travel between the spirit realm and the mortal realm, making it difficult for cultivators to descend. While there are certain ways to bypass these restrictions, any cultivator who makes the journey finds their strength significantly diminished. She asked if he was worried about the sect's retaliation, and when he nodded, she seemed to breathe a visible sigh of relief. He remarked that it was quite a distance, but he feared that killing the junior would only bring the elders looking for trouble. To be perfectly honest, he was a man who hated complications above all else, and so, having finished his business, he prepared to leave. He told her they likely wouldn't meet again in the world of cultivators, primarily because he lacked a spiritual root entirely. Even if ordinary cultivators met him, they wouldn't be able to sense his true depth. With that, he turned to make his exit. However, Lu Rian hurriedly called out to him, asking if he had any interest in the now vacant throne of Daqing. He simply waved his hand and lowered his bamboo hat, stating he was merely a town mayor and asking her to keep today's events a secret. With a final farewell, he took a single step forward and vanished completely into the vast, rolling darkness of the night. After returning to Gantang town, he resumed his quiet life as if nothing had happened, letting the days drift by in peace. By the 85th year, his strength attribute had reached 40 points, and he began to realize that simply increasing raw power had its limits. He began to hit a bottleneck, realizing his physical body could no longer withstand such immense power, and so, he decided that next year, he would focus on increasing his constitution. By the 90th year, Daqing saw a great revival under the diligent rule of Empress Lu Rian. After stabilizing the realm, she erected a wordless monument deep within the palace, visiting it to pay her respects every new and full moon. Only a select few knew she was waiting for someone, while we find our protagonist simply fishing by the town pond. During these 10 years, he added 5 points to his constitution and 5 to his luck. By now, the sheer toughness of his physical body was comparable to a top-tier spiritual tool. Even if a golden core cultivator attacked him while he stood still, he'd likely only suffer a scratch. However, in the 95th year, he unexpectedly obtained a fragmented map from a traveler. On this map, the location of a teleportation array leading to the spirit realm was recorded. He took one look at it and casually tucked it into a book. using it to steady a wobbly table leg. Go to the spirit realm? What a ridiculous joke. He had heard that golden core masters were as common as dogs there, with nascent souls everywhere. In the mortal realm, he was a supreme ancestor. But in the spirit realm, he feared he'd be an ant easily crushed by anyone. Why would he ever go there? He had no idea, of course, that his current physical strength alone was enough to beat a nascent soul cultivator to death. By the 100th year, the elders of Gantang Town had passed away wave after wave, leaving only memories behind. He had become the oldest man in town, yet his appearance remained that of a 20-year-old. To avoid shocking the locals, he used a disguise technique to give himself a mustache, pretending to be middle-aged. One day, a woman arrived in town, dressed in elegant, expensive robes. He recognized her instantly as the former empress, Lu Rian. 20 years had passed, and her face bore the slight traces of time. She knew he hated complications, so for 2 decades, she never sought him out. But now that she had abdicated her throne, she had come here alone. She asked him softly if she might trouble him for a cup of tea. He invited her in, noting that the tea had just finished brewing. And so, a quiet reunion began. Upon hearing her request, he simply smiled without offering an explanation or a denial, for he knew the truth of the situation. A mortal's remaining years are far too short. By the 115th year, he had increased his strength to 50 points. With his constitution now at 20 points, his physical density had reached a level that was, frankly, quite terrifying. He now had to carefully control his strength just to walk. It was during this year, on a day of heavy, swirling snow, that the small courtyard next door became unusually quiet. He pushed the door open to find the silver-haired Lu Rian resting in a rocking chair. She was covered by a thick fur cloak, the very same one she wore when they first met, though it was now quite worn. She looked at him, and for a brief moment, a spark of youthful satisfaction flickered within her clouded eyes. She whispered that she had been drinking his tea for 15 years now, and that she was truly content. With trembling hands, Rian reached into her robes and pulled out a warm, smooth jade pendant. This was the highest-level secret medicine of the Daqing imperial family, a treasure of immense value. She confessed that she hadn't just protected the borders for the sake of the empire, but because she knew his heart. She knew he despised complications, and she believed that as long as the Daqing Empire stood firm, those blind and foolish troublemakers would never dare to disturb the peace of Gantang Town. Now that her time had come to leave, she felt honored to have spent the rest of her life by his side. Rian passed away with a smile amidst the falling snow, finally at peace after her long journey. He stood in the snow for a long time, unmoving. Eventually, he stood before her grave and performed a final gesture. He poured a cup of hot tea for her, wishing that in her next life, she wouldn't be born into a royal family. He hoped she wouldn't encounter an immortal either, but instead find someone to love and grow old with. By the 120th year, we see him experience a strange, inexplicable palpitation